Hi, my name is Inu Habdev. You might remember me from such YouTube videos such as 8 Years of PlanetSide 2 and First Play Montage of Valorant. 8 Years of PlanetSide 2, here we go. I made this 2 years ago, I just want to give you guys the hype of PlanetSide, just a little bit. I may not have PlanetSide 1, but I put a lot of love onto this video 2 years ago. Just want to give you guys a little bit of a hype. I had a weaker computer at the time, so this was a bit of a challenge to do. I tried to incorporate infantry, armor, and aircraft gameplay all into this 4-minute video. Duraf, AODR, and a couple others are in this video, if you guys are paying attention. SKL, huge shout out to SKL for helping me get some of these shots. BCO is here. Good to see. I apologize that the video quality is not the best, but at least you guys get to see what I try to do here. The old Esamir. I like this aerial shot. Can't forget about the Valkyrie and Galaxy drops, can I? Max crashes. Bastions, you can't forget those. Harassers. Armor clashes. Mag Riders. 8 or more of them. FedEx was part of this video. Infiltrators. Aerial strikes. We need to see more of this in the game. We need to see more of this. Judoka, shout out to VCO. Base, the flail. Who doesn't like the flail? And the Colossus. Harassers. Love it. This took me weeks just to get them all. This took me weeks to get all the footage together.
All forces at ground.
What better way to finish a video with orbital strikes? This was not an easy project for me to do, but I'm glad to have gotten this done. The PlanetSide 2 escalation screen. Who remembers this photo when it was first released a couple years ago? Here's the quick credit screen. So, like I said earlier, I directed and edited this whole video by myself. This base, if I remember correctly, this base with at least 3 or 5 people took us about 40 minutes to build. SKL helped me with this shot in particular, just to give you an example. When alert was over, the entire platoon started the warp gate, and we did a nice shot with a Valkyrie. You guys can't see it, but we did this shot with a Valkyrie. I did not have observer camera at the time, but I cut off the top portion of the screen, and if I did not cut off the top portion of the screen, you would see a Valkyrie gun right there. I don't remember who flew the Valkyrie at the time, but I just want to quickly show you going to quickly give a shout out to all the people that helped make this film possible. So the film crew assistants I had at the time was Achilles, Elray Zero, Drumlius, Local Dingus, Mark AM, and Eredice. AODR celebrating the end of an alert. Shout out to Sokar's Legion, by the way. I don't know if you can see the names. I can't see the names very clearly at this resolution, but I wonder how many of these people are still playing the game. Shout out to you guys. And finally, we have 8 seconds. This group is still active. Here we go. Let's start talking about PlanetSide 1. This is going to be our first part we're going to be talking about. So Bishop, you have the most information. So I'm going to let you talk uninterrupted and start from the very beginning.
All right. So PlanetSide 1 is really the first attempt at an MMO FPS that there ever was. So, you know, your competitors at the time, it was like Battlefield 1942 was a larger scale first-person shooter. So I forgot what the teams were like on that, but I think it's probably like 16 versus 16 was the most you could get on Battlefield 1942. And then aside from that, you had things like Quake, a lot of death matches. Unreal Tournament was out, and Counter-Strike. So Counter-Strike had just gotten into competitive play. It had gotten out of alpha, and had actually been, you know, accepted by. It went from a mod to an actual full-out game as part of the Half-Life franchise, basically. But you didn't have anything that compared to PlanetSide. PlanetSide 1 launched, and you saw things like outfits, you know, which is PlanetSide's version of a clan or a guild. It was a regular occurrence to have outfits at 1,500 members. Not just like one or two that were well known, but every outfit had 1,000 members, 1,500 members. It was just huge, and it played differently. So in PlanetSide 2, we've got all these different base designs, and you know, 30 bases on a continent. In PlanetSide 1, you had something more like 10 to 15 bases on a continent, and there were only 5 types. And those are your big white bases. So you had tech plants, interlinks, biolabs. I'm drawing a blank on the other 2 types. But you basically had amp stations. You had 5 base layouts, and they were the same no matter what continent you were on. A tech plant was always the same tech plant, same building, same base layout and everything. But it was a slower paced game because there were only 2 capture types. You either took control of the main building and got into an area called the CC, the control console, and you had to have a hacker hack it. So infiltrators were basically, they were really important. The infiltrator would sneak in and hack the control console, and then you had to do a King of the Mountain for 15 minutes. And that's every single base. Regardless of what type it was. And the crazy thing about it was, it wasn't you sit in the zone of control of a control console and 15 minutes later you win, and if they jump on the point, they take it from you. It's if somebody hacked that control console, it would flip the timer back. It wouldn't even roll the timer back, it would cancel the hack. So a cloaker could sneak in to the control point while you're defending it and hack it, and the timer would suddenly stop. Yeah, that screenshot's amazing. So Galaxies could carry small vehicles, and then there was a Lodestar vehicle there that could carry heavy tanks. So we could fly Vanguards and Prowlers and Magriders not only across continent, but from continent to continent. You could take your Lodestar with your heavy battle tank on it and fly it through a warp gate and teleport it to another continent, and then drop it off on some other base you were fighting at. What are some of the other big differences? There was a capture the flag format, so some bases you were doing that 15-minute hack, And other bases, you were hacking the control console, and it would drop a, I forgot what it was called, but it would drop a module, and you would have to carry that, and then somebody would pick you up, like with a harasser or something. They'd pick you up, and you'd have to drive it back to the control console of the base you controlled that was linked to it. The flow of battle was basically you had a base, and then you had the sphere of influence, which you might know as the no build zone on PlanetSide 2 now. In that sphere of influence, you would have a tower, and the tower had a spawn room in the basement. And so the flow of battle was, we're going to start a fight. I control this base. I'm going to go down the lattice and attack the next base. We would bring in troops through a troop transport or an AMS, which is a Sunderer, a cloaked Sunderer. And the first thing you do is take the tower, because once you controlled the tower, the spawn room would then start working for your friendly empire. And then it was a short hop and a skip over from the tower to the main base walls. I have no idea what those wildlife creatures are.
I thought for a second PlanetSide 1 had wildlife.
So you basically had a known flow of battle. It wasn't just throw bodies on the point, and if you have more bodies on the point for the timer to go down, you win. It was you had to control the interior of the building and keep a security patrol, basically, keep people on top of it that are looking for a cloaker that's going to try to reset the hack. So there was a definite flow of battle where it was take the tower, then control the area around the walls of the base, because every base was designed kind of like an interlink facility is right now. So every base had a huge wall around it, and you had to get through the wall, over the walls, and then control the courtyard, the outside area inside the walls, so that you could then do a inch-by-inch corridor fight battle into the base to get into the base. So every single base had every element of the game. You had armor and air that needed to suppress the sphere of influence. You needed to suppress the courtyard, and then once you controlled the courtyard and you could get your Sunders, your spawn point set up inside the courtyard, you had corridor tunnel fighting down into the lower levels of the base to get to where you needed to go in order to get the hack on. So every single fight was air, ground, infantry, and then it was just a meat grinder getting through the hallways. And that's where max crashes came from, because if you had a platoon, and platoons in PlanetSide 1 were 36 people, if you had a platoon of maxes, that's a really formidable force. It's like almost impossible to drop if they can get inside the base. Once they're inside, they're going to clear the hallways. OSs were a lot deadlier. OSs destroyed basically anything in their path. And OSs weren't something that you spent outfit points on. They were something that you got. You had your battle rank like we do now, but you also had a command rank. And command rank you only earned by leading squads and platoons. And once you maxed out your command rank, which was not easy to do, every 3 hours you could set off an OS. There were no resources or anything spent for it. And so in the late stages of the game, everyone had command rank 5, everyone had an OS. And so you'd have these battles for these bases where you completely controlled the outside and you were fighting down the hallways, and then the people inside would drop OSs on the base and wipe out everything, and then the fight would start over. So that's kind of like the difference play style wise for PlanetSide 1. I saw a message here in a chat. Scooby Snack Attack was asking to give a shout out for PlanetSide Forever. They have like reverse engineered PlanetSide 1. You can find it online, and there are servers where you can play PlanetSide 1 right now. But as far as the history of the game and how it feeds into PlanetSide 2, I think one of the big noticeable things was PlanetSide 1's player population dropped over time. To the point where the last few years of it, you did not have people just signing on casually to play. So right now we have a ton of people who aren't in outfits, where we have brand new outfits that are popping up all over the place. You know, these people get together, they start a squad, they're like, hey, let's start an outfit. And so there's always new names. Like, the big outfits that are big in PlanetSide 2 now are not the same outfits that were leading the game 3 years, 4 years ago. There's a lot of evolution in PlanetSide 2. PlanetSide 1, it was a subscription game. There was no free to play. So if you were playing, you were spending $15 a month to play it. So as the game population declined, you only had serious outfits playing. People who were putting their money where their mouth is, paying for the subscription, and joining an outfit. And so there were a lot of basically really well-entrenched, established outfits that had been there for years, and that's the only people who played. So it turned into every base you were at, it's like, okay, which outfit's going to defend this base? And everybody knew who everybody was. And we even staged our own events without the company doing server smashes. We would set stuff like that up between the outfits to have more fun between each other. And that was a lot of fun. The carryover into PlanetSide 2 with that was when PlanetSide 2 launched, when PlanetSide 2 was announced, it revitalized PlanetSide 1. And there was this huge spike in all these old players and old outfit leaders coming back to PlanetSide 1 to get their practice on. And so when PlanetSide 2 launched, all of these old outfits from PlanetSide 1 got together and basically had meetings and said, which server are we going to play on? And these are like enemies talking. This is like people on the VS talking to the NC going, we like fighting against you. Like, we've been doing this for years. What server are you guys going to be on so we can be on the same server? And so we did that. The Emerald server, and I know that's where SKL's plays at. Emerald server used to be called Matherson's. And when PlanetSide 2 realized that it wasn't going to, when the population was starting to drop, they merged some servers. They had a lot of servers at first, and they made a smaller number of servers. And so they had a server smash.
Yeah, we'll talk about. Let's try to stick to PS1 first. We could get to PS2 later.
Sure. Yeah. So I think one of the big things I left out of PlanetSide 1, which you can see on the screen there, well, if you look up Battleframe Robotics, I know I saw some photos of it earlier. There's a lot of lore in PlanetSide 1 that's part of PlanetSide 2 that people aren't even aware of. But yeah, Battleframe Robotics. So their first and only content drop for PlanetSide 1 was to give us Mech Warriors. And when these things launched, you had to go. They created a cavern system, which is kind of like the cave at. Oh, now I'm drawing a blank. Not the Crown, the base in the middle of Amaranth.
I can chime in a bit. When did these Battleframe Robotics first start appearing in PlanetSide 1?
I want to say 2005. The end of 2005. So the beta was in middle of May 2003. 2004 is when the game was astronomically huge. And when I say it was huge, there were some continents would have, like Osher right now, that has long bridges across water. There were continents where basically that's how that continent was set up. But again, we're only talking about 10 to 15 bases on a continent. And you can only attack ones you were linked to. And generally a base only had one or two links to the next base. So it wasn't like which of these 10 bases are we going to fight at? It's which of these 2 bases are we fighting at? Yeah. And you would have these really long bridges. And I think Cysor is one. If you look up Cyssor. There it is, bottom left corner of that current image.
Right here, the one I have right now?
Yeah, so bottom left is the Cysor continent. That green one.
Oh, yeah, Cysor. Yeah, there it is, yeah.
Yeah, so there were really long bridges, and you had to get your equipment across the water to get to the next base. And so we would have 12-hour-long bridge combats. You would spend an entire day trying to take the bridge. That's unheard of in PlanetSide 2. You might have a 2-hour-long bridge battle, but the alert's going to kick off at some point. But you would literally have 500 people fighting over a bridge because you had to get to the next linked base, and you had one option.
Yeah, I'm just loading up Cysor right now. If it even shows up in a search result here.
But whereas we'll say in PlanetSide 2 we'll say Indar Thundar, we called Cysor Side. Everyone wanted to fight on Cysor. That's not a coincidence. It's kind of like a scissor, doesn't it? Yeah. So here's the thing. All the continents and all the bases are named after different gods of different belief systems, different pantheons.
Yeah, so we've got Scissor, Amrish, Sirushin, TR Sanctuary, Solsar, NC Sanctuary, Oshur, Seerhus, Ishundar, Forcerol, VA Sanctuary, Hassan, and Izmir. I'm surprised the sanctuaries are in the actual map. That's interesting.
So how that worked is you had your like I'm an NC player, so we had the NC Sanctuary, and it would link. You have a work gate on the NC Sanctuary, and it links to 2 continents, and those are your quote unquote home continents. And so you can only fight at bases that are linked to bases, and you can only fight on continents that are linked to continents that you control. So if I'm in the NC Sanctuary and let's say Ishundar and Sisor are home continents, we have to make sure we control those before the work gates on those continents are active, and then we can go through those work gates, and they each link. Each of those continents have 2 other work gates that link to 2 other continents. So each empire had 2 home continents, and then you had another. I want to say another 4 continents in the middle that were kind of like no man's land. In order to fight on those continents in the middle, you had to have control of your home continents. So when in PlanetSide 1, when you warp gate somebody, like in PlanetSide 2, when you warp gate somebody, we're on Endar, and you push them all the way back to their warp gate. PlanetSide 1, in order to warp gate somebody, you have to control your home continents and the home continents in the middle of the map, and then from those, take over both continents that are the home continents of your enemy. And that was what warp gating was called, to where they literally could not fight anywhere except for coming out of their sanctuary. And that did happen. And I think I sent you some images.
Yeah, am I allowed to go to your DMs right now as you talk?
Sure. Yeah, so there's images where you see a massive amount of tanks. So that's a screenshot of my outfit back in PlanetSide 1. If you keep going down...
Yeah, I'm gonna go down.
Yeah, I'm watching the stream. Sorry. When you get warp gated, you literally have nowhere to go except for your sanctuary, and so all of the outfits of particular empire would communicate with each other, and they would line up hundreds of players.
I have to ask you this, Bishop. When you have this many players in one area, did it lag?
Not at all.
No.
I didn't. No, there were not like, oh wow, there's too many people of this fight to fight. Like the game was low resolution. Even for the time it performed.
It performed well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was on dial-up originally when this came out. Maybe like DSL 1.5 meg per second connection. But yeah, the fights were massive. We actually formed a new conglomerate alliance of the top 10 ranked NC outfits in the game, and then once a week we would have an alliance night where we would have 170 players on a voice server together, and we would be broken up into divisions. So each outfit would have its own division. You'd have one commander commanding 10 outfits.
Wow.
Like, today we yell at each other on command chat and argue over what we're going to do. We actually had an alliance where each week we would pick a different outfit leader or one of his officers to lead the entire group. And so you'd have 170 people, which was the most you could fit onto one continent for a single empire.
I want you to describe quickly what the orbital strikes were like in PlanetSide 1. I think I got the right image right here, but I can't understand exactly where the orbital strike actually happens at this screenshot.
Okay, so they dropped the orbital strike on the door there, and this was to break up a max crash. We had an entire platoon of maxes that were running from the tower into this base, and they knew we were running towards the front door, so they dropped an orbital strike on it. And the orbital strikes were a lot more powerful. They would destroy your deployed Sunders. Now, I'm using new terms. There was a Sunder, which was a transport vehicle, and there was an advanced mobile station, which was basically our cloaked version of a Sunder. The AMS for short. The AMSs were just a semi-truck that, when you deployed it, turned invisible like our cloaked Sundy does now, and people could spawn at it. The Sunderers in PlanetSide 1 were not spawn locations. They could fit 12 people in them. They had a big gun and a small gun and some machine guns on them. They were heavily armored, and they were there just to transport troops. So in PlanetSide 2, they just said, we're going to make the Sunderer be able to transport troops and be a spawn location. And when PlanetSide 2 launched, the Sunderers did not have a cloaking field. You could not buy that. So that was kind of neat. So in PlanetSide 1, you would have people they prided themselves on being good AMS drivers and knowing where to park the Cloaked Sunder. That's what they would do, is they drive AMSs. And so we had people who were basically professional AMS drivers. That's what they did because they were so vital to a fight. You didn't have spawn beacons. You didn't have routers. You only had these cloaked AMS spawn points and the towers outside of the base you were fighting at to spawn at. That's it. That was a really big deal.
The next thing I want to talk about is the screenshot you gave me. How different the UI was. So, are you seeing the screenshot that I'm showing you right now? And feel free to talk about what's in the screenshot right here, because I don't think a lot of the fan base here knows much about PlanetSide 1. So let's focus on this photo in particular and explain what's on this. So I know there are some things on the screen. Yeah. It's a little blurry, but just give us an explanation to what we see in this photograph right here.
Right. So this is a screenshot from a Max Crash right before the one that the OS destroyed. So starting at the top of the screen, there's your squad lists, your platoon, and you could have 3 squads, and your members went from left to right. So the top row is one squad, the second row is another squad, the third row is another squad. So in this one, we've got 3 squads, and there's only 2 people in the third squad. And you can see their health and everything right there. So you know who's down, you know who's up, and you know if somebody needs to be repaired or healed. And you can see their name and everything. All that information's on the top of the screen. The next thing you've got is, obviously you still have your respawn if you die in the center of the screen. That's what that message is. Your mini map on the bottom corner could be expanded like it can now. It's not quite as detailed, but you can kind of see on there, you can see some green dots and some green lines. The green lines are maxes that are going down a hallway inside that base. So that was a Max Crash that was going through this back door to get inside the basement of the base. And then you see the chat window is down there in bottom middle of the screen. There was no voice comms. If you wanted to talk to somebody else who played the game, you had to get on TeamSpeak or Ventrilo. Those were the voice applications that were out at the time. In game, there was no voice, so everyone watched their chat windows, and everyone would pay attention to what's going on in chat. That's how we communicated. Now, of course, once you're in an outfit, we would get a voice server, and then you do everything with your outfit. But the rest of the game, there was you could send sit reps and stuff through the command chat, but there was no command voice. So if the NC wanted to get their act together, they did it through typing, or they set up alliance servers, voice servers to talk on. That's about that for the UI.
Did you talk about the one that's on the bottom right there?
That's just your options. So, like, if you were to hit escape in PlanetSide 2, and you have that bottom row of icons to go into your gear or look at your boosts or go to the shop, go to the map, that's what that is, basically. I did leave something out. One of the biggest changes that PlanetSide 2 did from PlanetSide 1 was, in PlanetSide 1, it was a true MMO, Massive Multiplayer Online, with character levels. So in PlanetSide 2, just to give a comparison, PlanetSide 2, you have different classes, right? You can be a medic, you can be a heavy, and then you spend cert points to get gear and skills within those classes. In PlanetSide 1, there were no classes. You got a limited number of cert points, and the cert points were spent to buy into the ability to use different things or to have different skills. And so instead of having an infiltrator that can hack things and having a medic that can heal things as classes that you can just swap out what class you're doing, you actually had to develop your character. So you couldn't get everything. Even at max level, you could not have everything on your character. So you had to decide what you were going to get. If you wanted to pull a Vanguard, you had to spend cert points to unlock Vanguard. And I'm just going to throw out random numbers here, but let's say at top rank, you might get 100 cert points. The ability to pull a Vanguard is a skill that you buy for, let's say, 5 of those. And if you wanted to be an advanced medic that could resurrect people, you got to buy into the first level medic and then to the second level. So you would custom tailor your character to do the things you like to do in the game and only those things. So if you didn't buy medic, you could not res people. And again, there was a scarcity of points. You could not do everything in the game. And now, I forgot how often it was. Every once in a while, you could do a character reset, and it would unspend all of your points, and you could rebuild the character. But right now, you can spawn any class you want and play any way you want. In PlanetSide 1, there was thought put into what is my character going to do. So that was a huge change.
I'm just talking. I finally pulled up your video called "The Last BFR" just to show what kind of gameplay there is.
Sure.
And
well, so the last BFR video doesn't show gameplay because this is an actual film that we produced and shot. So all of this is scripted, and we had to set up scenes and find continents that people weren't fighting on to do the scenes. It took us about a year and a half to get all the scenes and do the voiceovers. My friend that directed this and wrote the score. It's got its own music soundtrack to it and everything. But it tells the story of the BFR, the Battle Frame Robotics, which basically a lot of people say ruined PlanetSide 1. You had tens of thousands of players. BFRs came out, and they were overpowered. Once you unlocked the BFR, which you had to go through some things in the game to do, a single BFR, if piloted well, could kill 10 main battle tanks without even being scratched.
that's what a Sunder looks like?
That's a Sunder, yep. And again, a Sunder is not a spawn point, it's just a transport.
Even though this is scripted, but this should give enough of an idea to PlanetSide 2 players how PlanetSide 1 was back then. I'm going to say... Yeah, I'm going to say that the PlanetSide 1 Sunder... Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I said, if you go forward, there's a big section there. That's the actual battle we scripted to fight the BFR. The story of this is, we wrote a story where the three empires realized that the BFRs were too deadly. They were weapons of mass destruction. And so the story that my friend wrote was that they did an arms agreement to dismantle BFRs and to remove the respawn protocols for the pilots to erase that technology from history. So basically everyone executed all their BFR pilots and blew the BFRs up. But one of them escaped. The NC's greatest warrior escaped. And these are his former friends hunting him down.
And there's the robotics in action.
Yeah.
Wow. This is my first time seeing this video, and I'm using this as a background while you're talking about PlanetSide 1. Even though it's scripted, it's really interesting to see how much different PlanetSide 2 is compared to PlanetSide 1. And imagine seeing one of these things in PlanetSide 2 right now if that ever became a reality.
Yeah, so they eventually balanced the BFR. They made it so that it was vulnerable to infantry more, and it became a standard part of the game. But for about 6 months, BFR walked onto the battlefield. It was almost game over.
Like Transformers meets PlanetSide.
This was a fun thing. This was towards the end of PlanetSide 1. We finished it up, I want to say, in 2010, 2011. It was about 2010 when we were filming the last of this. I do want to give a shout out to an old friend, the player who piloted the BFR for the movie, whose name was Kablast. He passed away a few months after the film was finished. And we knew that was coming. He was an older gentleman, but this was kind of a tribute to him as well. So a lot of heart and soul put into it. You know, it's not as flashy as gameplay videos, but it tells a whole story and everything. It's pretty cool.
This is, even like I said earlier, even though this is scripted, it still gives you an idea of what the gameplay looks like. You got your Valkyries, you got your robotics, you got your continents. Not as much detail like foliage, but for its time, I think it looks pretty good. It really looks good. And you got your terminals.
Yeah. This game launched, beta was in 2003, and there were tens of thousands of players playing it. It was the only game of its type. And it's like, now you've got Battlefield 2042 launched with 128 player maps. And they're just now getting that type of stuff to work on these other games. PlanetSide's always been like the leader in that. They came up with the idea of these huge battles.
Wait a minute. Does PlanetSide 2 have aviator shades?
I don't know if they do.
Because look at this right here. Yeah, that would be so cool to have on our character. Come on, PlanetSide 2. Why can't you give us these cool shades? I mean, like Top Gun. If Top Gun can have it, why can't we have that?
I should have mentioned this too. The person narrating the story is Das Altic Soldat, my outfit leader. He's got a a booming, gruff voice for this film, and he was going to be here with us today, but he had some technical difficulties. But he's the heart and soul of our outfit. He's been in.
I'll give the link to you guys in chat here, so you guys can check it out in your own time. There's the link right there for you guys. You just continue what you're talking about, because I'm just gonna play the rest of this video here as a background, just to give our PlanetSide 2 players what PlanetSide 1 is like.
Sure, I don't want to take up.
Well, what is this vehicle right here, for example? Let's continue with that.
Okay, so this is another one of my sore spots in PlanetSide 2. That is a Skyguard. So the Skyguard was a harasser with the Skyguard gun on the back of it. And the reason that matters is because it was a lot deadlier. Skyguards in PlanetSide 2 kind of harass air. Like, you can get some kills with them, but it's not like... It's like, if the pilot doesn't want to get killed by a Skyguard, it can get away. And even if there's multiple Skyguards, if it's like, oh wow, I'm taking damage, you can turn around and afterburn out. In PlanetSide 1... the Skyguard waited to pull the trigger, waited until it got a little closer, and then unleashed that Skyguard flak cannon on it. That air was dying. Like, these things had massive flak explosion radiuses on them, and they just shredded anything in the air. And of course, in PlanetSide 2, they just made it a gun that goes on the lightning tank. But yeah, these things were mobile and extremely deadly.
I have to ask you this: when it comes to these Skyguards and harassers, if you shoot it's possible to kill the player driving the vehicle, is it?
Nope. Yeah, there was no shooting the passenger or the driver.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought for sure when I saw this, hey, you can kill the driver, but you can't. Just like the lightnings we have now.
Right. So it was a faster lightning with a better gun.
Yeah, there's the robotics again. Is the animation for those a little choppy as we see right here in video?
Yeah, it was always like that.
I thought it was just my computer acting up, but no, that's pretty cool.
No. PlanetSide 1 was a little choppy. It wasn't lag, it's just the animations were rough.
And wait, I have to ask you this. What graphics settings was this movie shot? Was it as best graphics quality, or had to be reduced so that there's not going to be as much slowdown?
It looks like he might have removed some of the foliage settings, so there's not as much ground cover. But, I think he had a pretty good rig. This is about what PlanetSide 1 looked like.
It kind of looks like PlanetSide 2 at low settings in some ways.
Well, that's when PlanetSide 2 launched, it had ray tracing. Ray tracing was brand new, right? A lot of people don't know this, but when PlanetSide 2 launched, it actually, I would argue, looked better than it does today. But the servers weren't able to keep up with it. And so they spent like a year and a half recoding the game and removing the super advanced graphics. So yeah, when PlanetSide 2 launched, it was the most beautiful game we'd ever seen. We're in 500 player battles and the explosions are phenomenal. The ray tracing on the lights and everything. It was incredible.
Lens flare. Was this added in? Was this added into the movie, or does it appear like this in game? This lens flare right here.
No, he added that in.
Oh, that would have been so cool. That would have been so cool if it appeared like that. He hit the camera at the right position. That would be so cool.
Games Rule says PS1 had an AT-AT what? yeah. We had AT-ATs. They were amazing.
Yeah, I like that one right there in front of you. They call them robotics. And the animation is that choppy when they're moving.
Oh, well, and so we called them BFRs, right? Well, the other name for a BFR was Big Fat Robot. Yeah, that's what everybody called them. Or biffers. Biffers was
wait a minute.
slang for it.
That's the actual animation if you get off that thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's the other thing. Hackers could hack your vehicle and eject the pilot and take control of your vehicle. You had to watch out for hackers. If I was in my Vanguard, a cloaker could sneak up to the Vanguard, and if I was stationary, they could hack it, and it would change Empire colors and kick me out.
Wait. If that was in a PlanetSide 2, the Infiltrators can hack your BFR, right?
Infiltrators were so much deadlier. They could Infiltrators could shoot while cloaked. There was no uncloaking to shoot. Yeah, Infiltrators were amazing in PlanetSide 1.
Wow.
Not snipers though. The Infiltrators only had pistols. Sniper was a weapon that you put on a normal character.
Again, where are our shades? You had it in PlanetSide 1. Why can't we have it in the sequel?
Well, I mean, the Paladin's cool. He's got to have his shades, man.
Is that an orbital strike in the screen there?
Yeah. So this is the Paladin being destroyed by his right-hand man because he defied the Empire and refused the arms agreement, and so he's dropping an OS on his old friend, and that's the end of the video.
I hope the Orbital Strike plays in its entirety, because I think a lot of people are interested to see what the Orbital Strike looked like in the previous game. Okay, here we go. Here's the animation. This is going in real time, is it? It's not slowed down, not sped up. That's how it goes in real time.
He might have played with the timing a little bit to cut different angles. Yeah. So the different camera angles are slowing it down.
I have to say the PlanetSide 1 Orbital Strike looks a lot more interesting visually.
Yeah, so the other thing about orbital strikes were you didn't just go to the map and say, I want to drop an orbital strike here. You had to have a command tool, which is that equipment he pulled out.
Right there, like right here?
Yeah, so that white thing that he pulled off of his belt. So the other thing is you had a backpack of inventory that you had to manage. And so you could only carry so many items. It wasn't like if my engineer has these 8 things, I have 8 different hotkeys that they'll switch to. It's depending on what size of armor I'm wearing, gives me a certain size of backpack. So if I wanted to carry a hacking tool to hack things, and a medical tool to heal things, and a repair tool to repair vehicles, and a command tool to be able to use OSs, that's 4 different items I have to fit inside my backpack. And in order to set off an OS, you actually had to, in the middle of battle, pull the tool out, click the button, and then it would bring up a display for you to pick where you wanted to put the OS, and you could get killed while you were dropping that. And if they killed you before the OS animation started, the OS doesn't go off. And so there was a whole strategy around, like, we talk about using OSs to kill all the attackers around a base. You would have to make it outside of the base that they're currently sieging in order to set the OS off. Whole strategy around that.
Run this shot right here. Whatever equipment you had to put in your loadout, we would all see it visually. It doesn't appear out of nowhere.
Yeah, so you had 2 pistol slots, and you could put pistols or tools in those. And then you had 1 medium slot, which would hold your medium assault rifles and stuff. And then if you were a Rexo, which is the PlanetSide 1 version of a heavy assault, that's a certain suit that you can wear that has twice as much armor, and it could carry 2 large weapons. So you could carry 2 heavy weapons, your Shrike missile launcher and your machine gun. But in PlanetSide 1, like, those were actual slots in your backpack that you fit things into. It wasn't like, like on a heavy assault today, I can have an LMG. I can have, if through ACP points inserted it, I can have a heavy weapon in my secondary slot, and I can carry a rocket launcher in my 3rd slot. So I can carry an LMG, a jackhammer, and a decimator on my heavy, and I'm not worrying about backpack inventory. PlanetSide 1, that took up backpack space. So you had to decide, well, do I want to carry some med kits to heal myself? Do I want to carry enough ammo to keep my guns going? Well, I'm carrying 3 different types of guns. That's 3 different types of ammo. And people ran out of ammo all the time. No, engineers didn't have ammo packs to drop on the ground where you just got your ammo back. You actually looted ammo off of the corpses of the enemies.
Can you also loot enemy weapons as well?
Yes, and there's a whole strategy around that. Because inside of each spawn room there are lockers, and you could put stuff in the locker and it would stay there between game sessions. So you would go around and kill enemies, loot their backpacks, and then run back to the spawn room and throw the enemy weapons into the spawn room. So the NC people, we could kill TR and get chain guns, and then we'd keep them in our lockers to use for another day.
This goes along with not just the robotics machines, but also for enemy vehicles. You can drive them also, or is there a limitation there?
If a cloaker hacks you out of your vehicle, that is, like, so let's say I'm on the NC. If I hack an enemy mag rider, it forces the driver out of the mag rider. I can jump into the pilot seat and drive it away. It becomes a blue and gold mag rider.
I'm baffled to why that's not a thing in the sequel.
Me too. I think it's amazing. They should definitely have it.
Or maybe because there are some engine limitations to the sequel that they decided to cut that out.
Yeah, I don't know, but it was definitely a part of the game. I guess there's one more thing I would talk about for PlanetSide 1 that's changed. Each base had a generator. There was a whole economy around this. So, like, we have generators in PlanetSide 2, which will either bring down gate shields or bring down shields to get inside the interlink, stuff like that. In PlanetSide 1, every base had a generator that was usually in the basement. And in order for the shields on the base to work, in order for the gun turrets to work, in order for the spawn rooms to work, you had to have energy fuel for the generator, and those were nanites. And so in PlanetSide 1, you had a vehicle called the Ant, like we do in PlanetSide 2, but the Ant would go to warp gates and deploy, and it would siphon nanites out of the energy of the warp gate. And then you would have to deliver the Ant, drive it, or carry it with a Lodestar or a Galaxy, and drop it off to a base, and it would then deploy, and it would fill the NTU silo, the nanite silo, for that base. So if you were sieging a base for, let's say you're sieging a base for hours, like you just can't get inside the base to get the hack going, every time a base turret's destroyed, every time a door is hacked, equipment terminals are destroyed, all of that, the base would use some of its nanites to repair that stuff, automatically repair it. And the silo would run out of energy. If the silo goes to empty, the entire base shuts off and it goes neutral. And so now you don't have any spawn points, because then PlanetSide 1 you had your spawn room, spawn tubes, and that's where everyone spawned. And you could spawn camp. That was one of the strategies of taking a base, was pushing down the hallways to get to the spawn room, and then you could destroy the actual spawn tubes themselves. And if you destroy the spawn tubes, now they can't spawn there anymore. So PlanetSide 2, you can't even go to the spawn room. You just spawn camp them from the outside. PlanetSide 1, you could actually destroy their ability to respawn. Doing that was running the base out of energy.
Overall, PlanetSide 1 had a much more slower tactical gameplay feeling to it.
It was a much slower game, yes. Larger battles for the most part, and a slower gameplay.
PlanetSide 1, when it's in its prime, what you're seeing here in the video, it was a big no-no if you were going on foot like this. Was it?
No, we had big Zerg battles where people were running across the battlefield. But, you know, the tanks were deadlier, I think, if you can believe that. So being infantry was difficult to be out in the open. The other thing, this is another big point to talk about. PlanetSide 2, you've had, if I click on the gun, the first bullet at least is going to go roughly where I aim it. In PlanetSide 1, it had, like, they still have this in PlanetSide 2, what's called the cone of fire, where there's a circle, and the more you hold the trigger, the bigger the bigger the circle gets, and the bullets land somewhere within that circle. PlanetSide 1's entire gameplay was based off of the cone of fire, and so you didn't get extra damage for doing headshots. You couldn't one shot somebody with a sniper on the head, and you couldn't, if you landed all of your shots on the head, it didn't instantly kill the person. And people had more armor, they were a little harder to kill, and the weapons were less accurate on purpose. Every weapon had a cone of fire that bloomed pretty big fairly quickly, because they wanted to encourage squad play where there were overlapping fields of fire. So how you took down infantry players faster was to have more people shooting. And of course, once you got into the heavy weapons and head-to-head, like going head-to-head in a hallway or something, you definitely had the players who knew how to jig and duck down and get their shots, but it was a lot less about that twitch and fire skill and more about how are you placed in relation to the rest of your squad.
I'm just going over to the footage just to imagine what the gunplay was like. Whether you are on aircraft, armor, or an infantry, it definitely had a different look to it because of what the computers were capable of back in the day. And it's very interesting to see how some things have been incorporated into the sequel. For example, the trail of these air vehicles flying around and all these shots landing when you're shooting at the robotics on the ground. It's very interesting to see how much some things did get carried over to PlanetSide 2, but not entirely. And the other thing I want to talk about is the galaxies. Tell me, Jiship. I think some people here are very curious to how we can load up vehicles in the galaxies. Can you be in the galaxy and stay at the back of the galaxy? And how does that work?
So how that worked is you had two vehicles that could two air vehicles that could carry other vehicles. You had the Galaxy and the Lodestar, and how those worked was if the vehicle was on the ground and you drove up behind it, you would see a circle on the ground, a yellow circle with an icon in it, and you would hit your interact key, and it would open a bay door, and then it would animate. Well, it would open the bay door, and then you would drive your vehicle into the bay. So that's a good photo of that. So you hit the interact key, and it would open up the bay, and then you would drive your vehicle inside the Galaxy. And the Galaxies could carry ants and, I want to say ants, lightnings, and harassers. Well, and by harasser, I mainly mean the Skyguard, because the Skyguard was a harasser mod at the time. And then the Lodestar, which you can see on your screen there. So that's a Lodestar, and it could carry Sunderers and main battle tanks, and even BFRs. You could, like, one of the strategies you could do with a Sunderer is the Sunderer had an EMP field on it that would blow up all mines and disrupt turrets and stuff. And so we would put a Sunderer with 12 people inside the Sunderer, load it into a Lodestar, and fly it over above a base, and drop it from the air inside the walls, and it would, right before it landed, you would set off the EMP blast, and it would destroy all of their C4 and all of their mines, and disable all their auto turrets and stuff, and then the infantry would jump out. And that was one of the ways of getting over the wall and trying to take control of the courtyard.
You can see the pilot in these PlanetSide 1 vehicles. Just like the one on the ground, you cannot kill the pilot of the vehicle. You can't do that. Can you?
No, yeah, there's no killing pilots and vehicles in PlanetSide 1. They're all considered in the cockpit and protected.
Oh, that would be so cool to see broken glass, but I don't think the game would have handled at the time.
Right. But you can hack them.
Is it possible to hack flying vehicles while they're flying midair?
No, I've never seen it.
Never?
Yeah, never saw that happen, because it takes a while to hack. It's not an instantaneous thing.
The flying speed of the Lodestar and the Galaxies, were they similar, or was there a considerable difference on those?
Both vehicles were very slow moving air vehicles. They were a lot tougher. It was hard to shoot those vehicles down. Everything took longer to kill. So a Lodestar doesn't have guns on it, so it was very vulnerable. I'm not even sure the Galaxy. I don't remember. I don't think the Galaxy had guns on it either. You actually had to have an air escort to keep your Galaxies from getting shot down. They were really hard to kill, but they were just transports. That's the other thing, is the PlanetSide 1 was definitely, rather than here are your 6 classes, and it's, oh, we need a medic, somebody switch to medic, you had people who specialized in very specific style of gameplay. So we had people who the reason they played PlanetSide was they were engineers. Their job was to keep all the armor repaired, all of the vehicles flying, and that's what they did, because you had to specialize your character into something. Dedicated medics. It wasn't that they just always chose to play medic. It's like they actually built their character to be medic, because there were advanced levels of medic that did better things.
I'm just loading up the final moments of PlanetSide 1 here, and
Sure. Yeah, I think we should probably close up the PlanetSide 1 chapter with this.
Oh, so this is what the asteroids look like when they came down.
So this is the actual end of PlanetSide 1. Every single continent had a meteor storm that dropped on everyone's head. So those are just players watching the servers end. And they destroyed Araxis, and then the servers went offline.
I'm not seeing any damage to the players. I think that screen is just shaking really hard.
No, it's just shaking. Yeah, I don't think they actually killed players. I don't remember, but it was a cinematographic thing. You know, they were doing it to give us a big show.
Space Marines.
Sarlo, I was there. Gandalf, I was there 6,000 years ago when the servers went poof.
Here's a good shot of the lattice lines. Here's a good shot. Which continent was this? This is Ishundar, was it?
I guess it could kill you. Yeah, that's Ishundar. That's the other thing, is like in PlanetSide 1 we had 10 continents, and it was a different playstyle every continent. And we've been, 10 years later. I'm happy that we have the continents we have, but man, when PlanetSide 2 launched, we had 2 continents. For quite a while. Hassan came after some time, but I'm happy that we're getting more continents. But I do miss the fact that it was a massive. Yeah, there you go.
This great shot right here. This great shot right here of all the people gathering up one last time.
Yep.
These are all three factions coming together, not shooting at each other. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what it looks like. Yeah.
An orbital strike coming down because why not?
Oh, that was another thing. We called those OS parties. The thing about it was you had to get command rank 5 in order to use an OS. And I talked about that earlier. It took a really long time to get command rank 5 because you had to lead platoons to do it. And it took you got experience every time you led a platoon. It took a long time to get command rank 5. And you could only drop an OS once every 3 hours. Once you launched it, you had to wait 3 hours. So it was a big deal when you got your OS. And so typically your entire outfit or even your empire would get together and all stand in one spot, and your first OS would be to team kill everybody in celebration of having, made that final milestone.
And thank you so much for that. Actually, no. Round of applause to Bishop here. You basically talked about PlanetSide 1 for a good 40 to 50 minutes. And I almost did not interrupt you because I figured that you would have the most information about PlanetSide 1 out of all of us. And Sherman here, one of my moderators, just timed that applause just at the right time.
Nice. Well, I really appreciate you letting me talk about it.
Yeah. Before we finish up PlanetSide 1 here, if anybody has some comments, now is your time to come to the speaker podium right here on the Discord server. So the ability to speak is turned on. So like I said before, go to your hand icon and just request to speak, and I'll bring you over. That was a very interesting conversation. So let's talk about the pros and the cons of PlanetSide 1. And lastly, your most memorable moments of PlanetSide 1. This is going to be very interesting. So, Bishop, let's start off with the pros of PlanetSide 1. What do you think of the pros of PlanetSide 1 was, in your opinion?
I think PlanetSide 1, I think the pros were there was a lot more deliberate strategy. You went to a continent and you were like, you'd have 2 or 3 bases maybe you could fight at, and you would be gridlocked at a base. And in order to get any further on the continent, you've got to push one of those 3 bases. And it wasn't just whoever has the most people wins. Like, there were very specific objectives you had to get in a base in order to actually capture it. But there were some other tactics that I mentioned about the generators and the nanite silos, and you could run a base out of power. The other thing that you could do was, in order for you to spawn main battle tanks, you had to have control of a tech plant, like we do now, sort of. But having a tech plant, that was the only way to get a main battle tank. You couldn't just go back to Warp Gate and roll a battle tank in from the Warp Gate. You would have to go all the way back to Sanctuary, and if you were fighting on a secondary continent, you would have to drive it from Sanctuary to your home continent, across the entire home continent, onto the continent you were fighting at, and then drive it to the base that you were actually fighting at. So controlling a tech plant was a really big deal. And when you tie in controlling a tech plant with this generator and having the nanites to power the base, it becomes an important thing, because you could destroy the generator, and while the generator is destroyed, the tech plant's not operational. And if it's the only tech plant your enemy controls, they can't spawn basically the Reavers, Mosquitoes, and Scythes. They can't spawn Liberators. They can't spawn main battle tanks. And so that led to a strategy called gem holds. You would take a special ops team, like a single squad, and they would find a way to go behind enemy lines and go into the back door of a tech plant, destroy its generator, and then hold the room for as long as they could. And the entire time they're holding that room, the generator can't be repaired, so no one on the enemy force on the entire continent are allowed to spawn Liberators, Mosquitoes, main battle tanks. So it was a really big deal to hold generators. And I would say one of my favorite moments in PlanetSide 1 was in my first outfit before the Blue Lions, I was the leader of a D2A, Death to All, and we had a spec ops unit, and we took 12 people, and we took down the generator for a tech plant against the TR in this major 500 player battle going on around the surrounding bases, and we held the generator for 4 hours against 100 people with a 10-person squad. and because you had a single door into the room, and there were some strategies to get rearmed and get people back in there and stuff. But the gen holds were incredible. And I think I would say the alliances of outfits was my other favorite part of PlanetSide 1. Just having 10 large outfits all on the same voice server with a set command structure, and just the fact that PlanetSide 1 was a slower paced game. So having that level of organization, and we're going to send these tanks here, and we're going to send these people with galaxies to this base, and that taking time to set up and execute correctly, there was just a lot of joy in doing that well. The cons for PlanetSide 1, it was a subscription only game. You paid $15 a month or you didn't play it. Some other cons would be like we have population locks right now where you have to sit in queue. In PlanetSide 1, the same kind of system worked, except you had a sanctuary that linked to 2 continents, and if you didn't fully control those continents, that's the only 2 places you could fight at. And if those both had 500 players on them, you were waiting to play the game. And that does happen in PlanetSide 2, but not to quite the same level. Usually there's a continent open. Maybe the fights aren't the best because it's a lower population fight, but you could definitely have a situation where there was nothing going on except for the one continent you were on. That doesn't mean you couldn't go to other continents and do things. It just meant that that's the only place there was a fight, period. And it's because the base fights were so deliberate. It's like, this is the base we are fighting at. And if you can't get into that area, then there wasn't a fight. So I think the other thing is that it was a lot less about skilled gunplay and a lot more about operating in a squad or a platoon. Whereas PlanetSide 2, you can really, there's a lot of skill in how good you are with your gunplay and your movement and placement and accuracy.
Scooby made a good point in chat that you could jump a base, drain it, restore the NTU. I don't know what the NTU means, but that's what he says in chat, and you can also hack it. That's very interesting.
Yeah, that was another strategy that was really great, is you could go to an enemy base behind lines that you didn't have a link to, and if you got it to drain all of its resources, it would lose power and go neutral. And then you could bring in an ant with more nanites and refuel it, and once it was turned back on, you could hack it. And that was a way to skip the lattice section. So instead of we have to fight at this base because this is what we are linked to, you could send a special team in to the background, and no one knew you were there if you were careful about it until the base went neutral, because you didn't have alerts telling you how many people are in each zone. It was, you had to have somebody who was watching the map to look at the fuel level, the NTU level on the map for that base and go, wait, that's not supposed to be at 20%. That was just refilled an hour ago. And I go, there's got to be a base drain happening. And there were no alerts to let you know that it was happening. So that was pretty cool. There was a lot of sneaky stuff going on.
These are what the spawn rooms look like in PlanetSide 1. The ones we have in PlanetSide 2 right now, right?
Yep. And you actually did damage to those spawn tubes. So if the enemy flooded in there, they could destroy all 3 of those, and now you don't have a spawn.
Because in the sequel, as you all know, you have to destroy the SCU unit. But here you actually have to actually destroy the spawn tubes. That's it.
Yeah, so the NTU, or the SCU is kind of PlanetSide 2's version of destroying the spawn tubes and or destroying the generator. It kind of does both. But yeah, there's a whole strategy. Like my brother would hide in the basement of a base with an engineer tool, with a repair tool, and wait and like just try not to be found. And wait till we got the spawn rooms down, and they would go outside to go look for people to kill, and then he would sneak back into the spawn room and repair the spawn tubes, and then suddenly everyone's respawning in the middle of the base again. So that was kind of cool, because he could do stuff like that, where it's just like, I'm going to hide out here in this room that nobody even remembers exists down here in the basement, and come back here in a few minutes and restore spawns.
The continent. You said there's 10 different continents. Let's talk about that. So there were 10 different continents, and how many players could be in each continent? How many players can be from all 3 sides? Is it similar to PlanetSide 2, or was the system very different?
Yeah, it was. There were 10 continents, and all 10 continents were open at all times. It's just in order to fight on them, you had to have a friendly linked continent to that continent to start a fight there. Now, maximum players was 133 per empire. It was basically 500 players total per continent. So at its peak, when PlanetSide 1 launched, you had fights going on everywhere at all times. And then as time went down, you had a lot of empty continents. But there's so much more I haven't gone into that I'm not going to today because there's just no time. But there was a lot of other things you could do. You could go to an empty continent and steal mods and stuff from their Interlink facility. And if you were able to steal them and bring them back to your friendly continent and put them in your Interlink facility, you got extra abilities, faster respawn times, auto healing and stuff. And so there was stuff you could do on a continent where there wasn't active fighting, because you would have teams that would go do stuff like that, but then you would also have people that are flying around in an ESF looking for people who are doing that to keep them from doing that. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, Scooby saying they were called core modules. you had to go. The other thing is there were 10 continents, but there were also, was it 4 different caves? It was either 2 or 4 different caves. There were asteroids with caves in them, and those were the caverns, and those were other places you could fight as well. And in the core of those cavern systems, you would get these modules that would get, or basically the modules that you use outfit points to install at a base now to give them, like, faster respawn, or basically if you're at a friendly base and the module's installed, you heal. Those were modules that you had to get from going into the caverns, and they were a big deal. And you could basically go to an enemy continent that's completely enemy controlled, destroy their generator, and when the generator goes down, now the modules are exposed, and you can go steal a module and run it across the map. And it was hard to do, because you had to run it across the map and get it to a friendly continent where you could install it, and the icon of the module shows on the map as it's moving, so people can hunt you. So it was like a game within a game. Even on a continent where there wasn't fighting, there was espionage you could be doing.
Speaking of espionage, Bishop, I think we can round it PlanetSide 1 with this image here. What is going on here in PlanetSide 1 that we do never see in PlanetSide 2? What's going on in this shot right here? What's going on here? The empires are doing some science experiments, like in Doom?
Yeah, that looks like maybe some unfortunate souls who are needing some extra help being reconstructed.
Why does PlanetSide 2 not have this? What's going on here?
I'll end on that, because is this from the last BFR? Yeah. So one of the plot lines of the last BFR is that since we're immortal, like basically you can always respawn, and they explain that with nanite technology. One of their ways of getting information out of an enemy, especially a friendly that they're interrogating, was to stand in front of the spawn tube, and they would respawn and they would kill them, and then they'd respawn and they'd kill them. So they have to relive dying over and over and over again as a form of torture.
So this was in the game and no one complained.
Right. And one of the greatest honors would be for them to cancel your respawn timer or respawn count, so that you could finally go ahead and die. Because in the original lore, it's like we don't know exactly how many hundreds of years ago the three-way civil war started. We're just lost in this eternal civil war that never ends, because no one ever dies. And each faction's trying to find out the secret to permanently kill the enemy so that the war can end. And that's kind of the backdrop of PlanetSide 1 is you're in hell. Like, it's a war that does not end because no one dies.
You know what? I think this shot right here perfectly summarizes PlanetSide 1 in a way. And I want to see an artist. I want to see an artist from the PlanetSide community recreate this in PlanetSide 2's graphics. I'm surprised this is not in PlanetSide 2 at all. You go into a random base and you see this monstrosity. Why is this not a thing in PlanetSide 2 yet? It's creepy, but it's creepy, but it also reminds us it's a war. And it has this tube-like effects on it. Yeah, that's a good point. Why you could add this in Biolabs?
You're right on that. It was in the Biolabs. The Biolabs. Oh, that's the other thing. Biolabs on PlanetSide 1 weren't gardens where they were growing everyone's food. They were basically research centers.
see, why couldn't you PlanetSide 2 have this little detail right here? What if there was maybe one VS player, NC player, TR player in these tubes when they were experimented on? I mean, it doesn't add too much, but even just a little bit of detail like PlanetSide 1 had, that would make it interesting lore or meta.
Yeah, so I'll leave on this thought, which is, I've talked about PlanetSide 1 for an hour now. I love PlanetSide 2. There's been lots of changes in PlanetSide 2 over the past 10 years, some good, some bad. And there are obviously some things about PlanetSide 1 that I miss, that I think that they could implement into PlanetSide 2, if it's done correctly. I do miss some of the more deliberate strategy that you could do, and there was more deliberate espionage available, but overall, PlanetSide 2 is an absolute blast to play.
Honestly, Bishop, that was a very good hour of you talking, honestly, and I wish there were more people that could talk about PlanetSide 1, like that person you talked to me about. What was that person's name again? I want to give a shout out to him again.
Oh, that's my outfit leader, Das Ulte. I've been in the Blue Lions since 2007. I've been friends with them since 2005 when I led D2A. Das is his name translates from German to the old soldier. He's a tough old man, and probably he might be watching this now, but he's probably the oldest PlanetSide player that we have right now. I won't give out his full age, but he's been in retirement for quite a while.
And he said he was 80. He's 80 years old. That's absolute dedication.
Around there. Maybe 79.
That's absolute dedication right there.
For forgetting how old you are.
Shout out to you, Das out this old that. Thank you for continuing to run in the PlanetSide community, even if you couldn't appear on the show today.
Yeah, I'm the youngest senior officer in the group. We have a council of generals of 6 people, and I'm 42, and I'm the youngest.
So Bishop, would it be fair to say that Das out the Soldat is your grandfather?
He is my adopted online father.
wait, adopted Absolutely. Online grandfather.
I call him Pops sometimes, sure. Usually he's just boss.
It's really interesting to hear the community still stay strong in this game. Honestly, PlanetSide as overall, it's not as popular as the other franchises, but I'm glad that there's certain number of just enough players to keep the PlanetSide franchise going. It may not be as large back in the prime of PlanetSide 1, but I'm so glad to see this franchise still going and because of the support you guys are giving to this franchise. We're going to get to the PlanetSide 2 base shortly, but it honestly was interesting to hear the ups and downs of PlanetSide 1, even if it was just a quick summary. A very loyal community, to say the least. That's a good point Absolutely. That Tucano just said.
Yeah, I look forward to reviewing the rest of the podcast, seeing what some of the other guys you've got here tonight have lined up for the PlanetSide 2 talk. Really appreciate it.
Like I said, I appreciate you coming in, Bishop. Otherwise, it would have been me awkwardly talking about PlanetSide 1 even and not knowing much about it. Like I said earlier, I tried to give a shout out to this whole thing about a week ahead of time, but not many people came forward, and I'm glad you came in at the last minute just to talk about this, and I am very happy that you came on. I think I did the audience a favor by not interrupting you too many times, because sometimes the best information comes when you don't interrupt the guest. It's in this case, you are the MVP, Bishop. I want to say thank you, GG, to Bishop for talking to us about PlanetSide 1. I can't overstate this enough. So let's do a sound right now. A round of applause for Bishop for coming in today. Round of applause for Bishop.
All right, thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your stream.